Right, good evening ladies and gentlemen, this is Roy Lilley and welcome to HealthChat from the King's Fund. We've got a really interesting evening lined up for you, but first of all a word from our sponsors. And as this week is it right? This week is International Women's Week, isn't it always International Women's Week? Anyway, Natalie, coming from our sponsor. Big round of applause for Natalie.
Where do you want me?
Well, step further back, I think.
Where do you need me to?
Could you kneel down?
I always have this.
Perfect. You're perfect, Natalie.
Yeah,
perfect.
I'm kneeling down.
You can see me. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Health Chat, and welcome, Baroness Harding. You're very welcome. We're delighted to sponsor tonight, as we are with all these Health Chats. Personally, and from IMS Maxims, we see huge opportunity in the NHS. I think with the likes of integrated care systems, sustainability transformation partnerships, there's huge opportunity to bring together people and collaborate to improve healthcare. And we see technology as playing a really important role in that. But it would be remiss of me to not talk about some of the challenges as well that the NHS faces. Obviously with the kind of the winter pressures that are continuing, particularly with the kind of bad weather that we're experiencing, but also kind of real funding issues that we continue to face and battle with. Again, I think technology has an important role to play in addressing some of that, but certainly that's why we're really excited to hear tonight's session as to how you bring your depth and breadth of experience from outside of the NHS and healthcare to help us collectively tackle some of those challenges and really untap some of that opportunity as well.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you very much. Right, let's press on then. Will you please give a very warm Health Chat welcome to our guest this evening, Baroness Harding. Just flip the little thing that says mute. Okay, fine. That's very good. Thank you very much. Well, listen, welcome. How many people have been to a Health Chat before? Let's have a look. Oh, look at this. We've got the alumni in tonight. Okay. Well, listen, your life is about rats, pigs, and horses.
Where are the rats?
Your granddad was a desert rat.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes,
he was a field marshal, wasn't he?
He was indeed my hero.
Do you remember him?
Oh, well, I was very lucky in that I was a teenager when he was in his 80s and early 90s. And my grandmother died when I was 15. And I was the adored granddaughter. And so I used to go to stuff with him and listen to the words of wisdom of the octogenarian. He was shorter than me, had lost a lot of fingers in one hand, shrapnel in his legs from being blown off a tank in North Africa. So I don't, you can hear the emotion in my voice. I loved him. Yeah. I learnt so much from him. He used to say to me, when you're 16 or 18 and you're scared about the next big thing in life, and he used to say to me, you can't be brave unless you're afraid. So it's okay to be afraid, everybody is. It's what you do with the fear. And when somebody who's fought in 2 world wars started with nothing, he left school at 16, the son of a tenant farmer in Somerset, and finished his career, the only person ever in the history of the British Army who's begun as a territorial and finished as the head of the British Army. When someone like that says to you, it's okay to be afraid, and you're 16 and you're scared about going into sixth form, you sort of pull yourself together and say, come on. Yeah. And that has shaped me more than I can say.
I guessed it had. And when he held up his no fingers, yeah. What have you got to worry about? Yeah. And then it was pigs. You were born on a pig farm, were you?
I was indeed.
Were you born on the pig farm?
No, I was born in Germany. My dad was a soldier as well. My dad's nickname in the army was "I know your father," which is not an easy place to be. As he was doing his national service after the Second World War, and his dad was famous World War II general. So I was born in Germany, and I grew up on the farm that my grandfather bought in the Second World War. When he was blown off the side of the said tank, he was told he would never walk again.
Never sit on a tank again.
Yeah, and when he finally got back home, he bought this small farm holding on the Dorset-Somerset border, and then 6 months later went back to fight, leaving my grandmother to deal with it. And I grew up there, and my dad farmed. We had pigs, we had sheep, we had cider apples. It was a good West Country farm.
Well, apples and pigs go well.
They do indeed.
Yeah, the ones that fall down. So, where did you start your education in Germany? Were you one?
No. I was. Dad. We came. Dad
you went
left
to a private
Yeah,
First
we came home. I was born in Germany, but no, I was 6 months old or a year old when we came
So
home.
are you half German?
No,
I suppose you could be.
Born as a
They
child
might
of,
come in
of
handy
an
now.
officer of the British Army of the Rhine. I think I'm very definitely British.
Yes.
But it says
didn't have-
Hanover
you
on
didn't have the
my
opportunity,
passport. But I went to a Catholic convent school in Dorset from the age of 3 to 17.
The blonde was at a convent as well.
There you go.
That's right.
Nothing wrong with convent
Any
girls,
more
right?
convent girls here tonight? Yeah, right, only one. Okay. And then you were off to uni.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Where your alumni is Cameron, David Cameron?
Well, I read
Bob
politics.
Denoff. Bob.
No, well, that's don't believe everything you read on Wikipedia.
Right.
So I was at Oxford at the same
I
time.
read my own entry and I think, who the hell is that?
Exactly.
They've had a much more interesting life than I have.
So I was at Oxford at the same time as David Cameron, and we did both study the same subject along with several thousand other people.
Didn't do him a lot of good. did it?
Well, I mean,
Politics and economics, wasn't it?
we didn't. I never met him at university, and I was never taught by Vernon Bogdan or his tutors. So, as I say, I don't believe everything you read.
Yeah. And then of course, you went to the dream place. You went to Harvard.
I did.
A scholarship, or did you pay?
No, I
Tell
went.
the truth.
No, I'll tell you the truth. So I was from Oxford. I went to work for McKinsey as a business
I thought
analyst.
you went to McKinsey after.
No, before. No, so I went from Oxford to McKinsey for 2 years.
Did they recruit you while you were in uni?
Yeah, so they do it still today. They take
Foreign
a small
Office
number of
or
people
McKinsey?
to be analysts, and they certainly when I was there, they wouldn't let you stay more than 2 years. If you'd done your 2 years as an analyst, you were meant to leave and either get an MBA or go and work in industry.
Did you know why you went to McKinsey?
No.
You went to uni and you
Did
took,
anyone really
took a
know?
fairly vanilla degree in politics.
Yeah, master of nothing at all
Yeah.
was the PPE.
So, sorry to anybody who's got a PPE, and don't tell me you got a Desmond, otherwise you'll be thrown out. What did you want to do?
Well, I was very interested, unlike actually David Cameron, I was very interested in politics when I was at university, so I was very active
Hang
in
on,
the
I just need to
union.
let that...
And David Cameron wasn't.
Stop, hang on, I just did
He
that
wasn't.
roll.
That's why. And I was useless at it. To be honest, I was president of the Lost Deposit Society, which was a university-wide society that you could only become a member of if you'd come last in a university-wide election. And so I worked out that although I was really interested in politics, I was really very bad at it. And I came from a farming and military background. I had no role models of women who'd had careers, no sort of professional role models in my family's friends or anything. And when I was at uni, if you could, you either went into investment banking or consulting. And I had one summer job in an investment bank, and to be honest, I hated it because I couldn't quite get my head around why everything was just about numbers as they were analysing these businesses, and there was no talk about the people or customers. It just seemed really weird. So I sort of, as you do when you're sort of 20, I sort of scratched out the whole of the finance sector on the basis of my summer job. And sort of fell into applying for the consulting firms, as not with much imagination, to be honest. I couldn't have really told you about graduate trainee schemes anywhere in the public or the private sector at that stage. It was simply that if you didn't go into investment banking and you could get into consulting, you did. And I was incredibly lucky to get a job offer in.
Was it at a time when it was still quite difficult for women, wasn't it, in careers? It was just on the cusp of that, really. I mean, I was with Baroness Cumberledge's glass ceiling, because I was the only man on a committee of loads of women about the glass ceiling. And, even at that time, it was difficult to get into the profession. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure that as a sort of 20-year-old, I felt it was difficult.
Yeah.
I felt I was incredibly lucky to get that job offer. And McKinsey, as a junior analyst, was an amazing grounding in problem solving. I worked for some retailers, but I also did some work in the public sector. I did some work for the Atomic Energy Authority, which was one of my early clients when I was an analyst, and then worked for them again when I came back from business school. So I sort of felt like, well, I met my husband at McKinsey, and I grew up. I learned how to think there. But there's a point at which, as a consultant, you can advise on much, much bigger problems than you can actually solve yourself. Or, advise on decisions that are much bigger than you're ready to take yourself, and that's a very intoxicating thing to do. But actually, if you want to have your own head on the chopping block, to judged by the success of your decisions rather than whether the PowerPoint presentation was good and the recommendations made sense at the time, you need to be in a line job. So I left consulting quite early in my mid-20s because I'm very consciously moving away from those sort of boardroom power discussions to actually have my own head on the chopping block.
The big six, as they used to be called, it's the big four now. They got a kind of bad reputation, haven't they, in healthcare? They're not popular, the McKinseys and the Price Waterhouses and all the rest of them. Sorry if other consultancies are available, but they
who are upset that they're now not in your list.
Yes, please. Yeah, well, we can edit that bit out. Yeah, maybe we can't. We're live, aren't we? Right. Sorry, Mark Bricknell, if you're watching. I know you're watching. Yeah. But I've always been kind of in two minds, because you do get a helicopter view. You do get very clear minds looking at problems. When you're trying to run something, it's very difficult sometimes to take that pace back and figure out what it is you do need to do.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm in two minds too. I am quite a poacher turned gamekeeper. I am not an eager user of external consultants. In my entire, bear in mind I left McKinsey when I was 26. So I'm quite a bit older than now, but the brand never leaves you. Here we are talking about it.
Well, they're an interesting company, aren't they?
They are, and they're very good at what they do. And I've employed them and other consulting firms, a relatively small number of times, probably, over 30 years in, 25 years in business. I've got as many fingers as I've employed consultants' contracts over that sort of 20-year period. So that's not that much. Yeah. They can be very valuable, but I think they are only as good as their clients.
Yeah, McKinsey did a very
it's the
good
quality in the way you managed consultants that really drives, and lots of people are nodding in here.
Well, everyone says that, but I think when you get to the point where you think, I've got to get consultants in, you probably don't know what it is you want to do.
I don't know. I think it depends.
Sure, I buy that.
I think it depends. Sometimes it's an area where you don't know. Mm. Sometimes you just need an objective view in the room that is not part of the problem. Sometimes you don't have the skills in your existing organisation and you need to move faster. Sometimes you just need that agent for change. I'm not anti using consultants, but as I say, I think in the end, if I've learned anything in my business career, it is that the leadership and culture that leadership creates that determine whether or not organisations are successful.
Well, and your predecessor regime and where you are now, Jim, put a cap on the use of external consultancy. It is interesting because I think I'm right in saying it might have been 8, maybe 10 years ago, McKinsey produced a famous set of slides about the future of the NHS.
Well, you know more about this than I do. I've not seen those.
Yes, but they are interesting because they forecast pretty much the problems we've got with the money.
Well, sometimes they get
right. And they got it right about the better use of the estate. They got it right about the increasing the output of increasing productivity in the NHS, which is very difficult to do because it is such a people focus. Well, let's wind you back. Let's go back to Harvard.
So I went to McKinsey. I didn't answer your question, and I like to always answer questions. So McKinsey sponsored me through Harvard, and I actually also had a scholarship from the Kennedy Memorial Trust, so I was very spoiled.
You did well. Yeah.
And it meant that I didn't need to work in the summers between the 2 years. But I did have to go back to McKinsey to repay my debt afterwards.
Yeah. And what did you learn from your MBA?
Oh, goodness. That's a very good question. I think that, personally, I was probably too young when I went to Harvard. I was 22. And in retrospect, I'd have got more out of it if I had a bit more real-world experience. What I carry with me now is some pattern recognition from looking at lots and lots and lots of different business problems over a few years and learning from a very large number of people who tackled those problems in quite different ways. So it's quite an intangible thing, I think, you learn from an MBA. It's that sort of back of your head pattern recognition that gives you a sense of how you might go about solving a problem. Most people, when they leave Harvard Business School, and I'm sure I can fall to this, in the first 6 months afterwards, are convinced they are already the chief executive of GE or whatever. And everyone, as they come out with their MBA, goes through that period of discovering that they are still, in my case, 24 and don't know very much. And most of the value I have got from my MBA, I guess I've probably made more use of in the last 7 or 8 years as I've become a CEO than I did as I immediately left business
And the
school.
alumni are quite useful, aren't they?
Well, but much more diverse than the alumni from my undergraduate degree in Oxford.
Yeah.
So, one of my, certainly I think it's still the same. In Harvard you start and there's a group of 90 of you in your section. And when I was there for the first year, every single class you spent with the same 90 people in a theatre style hall. And everyone they contribute. The professor probably does 10 or 15% of the talking. And that group, one of my 90, he was on his way to becoming an admiral in the US Navy. Another chap was in his mid-30s with teenage children who was a doctor who went back into medical administration in the US. Lots of people like me, young and not with much world experience. A professional triathlete from Belgium, who is he and his son are dual world triathlete champions. Not obvious why he got an MBA.
Make a note of that. Belgium.
But
what is Belgium famous for?
Indeed. So much more diversity in people's backgrounds and therefore the way they approach their problems. So I think I sort of feel like I learnt to think from McKinsey and from Harvard.
It's a great luxury, I think, to go to Harvard because so many people. Who's got an MBA or a master's in this room? Put your hands up. Generally speaking, people get them later in life, don't they? And often they get them from distance learning. For example, NHS Leadership Academy. You can get a master's there, and so many other people, when they're old, they do it. When they're older, they've got a family, and it's much more difficult for them to do it. But the age thing is interesting, isn't it? Because education, I always think, comes too young. I left school at 15, and it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I suddenly started to get interested in education. Yeah. So it's interesting. So then you came back, and then how did you end up in Terry Leahy's office?
So I, as I said, I wanted my head on the chopping block. I'd done quite a lot of retail work for McKinsey, and I had, unlike financial services, had fallen in love with retailing because it was all in the end about people and theatre. Creating spaces that people wanted to shop in.
Front of house.
Staff who, in the end, great customer service is about great staff engagement. And
people like you used to talk of things about retailing being a leisure experience, and people like my mum would say, "Yeah, but you try and have to do it on a Saturday and carry
No, indeed, quite right. So I wanted my head on the chopping block. So I said to McKinsey I wanted to leave. And I didn't want to stay within the McKinsey family. I wanted to properly prove myself outside, so I didn't want to go to a McKinsey client. And I applied to get a job as the retail marketing director of Thomas Cook's shops.
Well, that's where you went first.
That's where I went. So I knew nothing about travel and precious little about marketing. Yeah. And they were brilliant at taking a risk on me. I think they wanted a sort of professionally trained P&G marketeer, but couldn't afford one, and got me instead. So I cut my teeth in the commercial world learning how to sell holidays. Yeah. And I learned the value of price, because even in those days,
Well, I know. I was just thinking about the serendipity of time, really, because that was the halcyon time, wasn't it, for package holidays?
It was if you owned a tour operator and an airline, whereas Thomas Cook at the time didn't. So we only had shops, and it was really.
So they transitioned, didn't they, from being the sort of snooty end of the market into the unwashed.
So we had, not the unwashed. We had shops, and all of our competitors. I wouldn't like you to think I'd said that. And all of our competitors had airlines and hotels. Yeah. And if you didn't own an airline or a hotel, all you had was the travel agency. You lost a lot of money. It was a really tough business to be in. So it was a very good place to cut your teeth.
But setting up the infrastructure for that was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yes, and I can't claim any of the credit for that.
They borrowed heavily, I think.
Yeah, and that's past my time, to be honest. So I learnt how to buy and sell holidays, and then I ended up, and I'll cut the story short, otherwise it will get very boring for everybody. I ended up at Woolworths, which had been a McKinsey client. I was persuaded by Sir Jeff Mulcahy, who was the chief exec of Kingfisher, that owned Woolworths and B&Q and Comet at the time, to go and work for Jeff. And I did one of those sort of tricky central jobs where I was in charge of global sourcing for Kingfisher, which was mainly trying to get the French and the English in the group to speak to each other. That if you could get the French divisions to buy products together with the English divisions, they could get a much better price. If you could buy Duracell batteries or own label batteries together. The challenge was getting the French and the English to share their cost prices. Does this sound in any way familiar to anyone working on procurements in the NHS?
Funnily enough, Patrick Carter sat in there.